By late 1941, most of Europe had become a vast Nazi-occupied empire. Some people greeted the German troops, but for the majority it was an invasion of their country, quickly followed by harsh laws and punishments for anyone who opposed the new regime.
So what was it like to live under the Nazis?
It depended on what country you lived in and what group of people you belonged to. Select somewhere.
I'll take France.
June the 14th, 1940, the Germans entered Paris. A week later, an armistice was signed, surrendering the whole of northern France to German control.
The Germans are everywhere. They run everything, from the railways to the press. They pick the government and force all France into one-sided collaboration. A regime of tyranny has been set up. The prisons are full, and every day fresh executions take place.
The Germans imposed curfews, power cuts, food rationing. Queues formed everywhere for everything.
What did the French people do?
They faced the same hard choices as every occupied country. On the one hand, you've a family to feed. On the other, if you just carry on as normal, you might be helping the Germans. At first, very few of the French resisted. They were shocked at the speed of their defeat and supported Pétain.
Pétain?
Marshal Pétain did not want France to disappear in Hitler's new Europe. As part of the armistice, he'd been allowed to govern a small part of southeast France from the spa town of Vichy.
We should go along with Germany's plans. It will be the best course to preserve France's honor by collaborating in the new order being built in Europe. This collaboration should be sincere and not in the least hostile.
But that's just giving in.
In 1940, millions saw Pétain as the savior of France. He seemed to be preserving honor out of defeat, and many of the German occupying forces behaved decently.
It looks peaceful enough.
The Germans shot this film, and they enjoyed Paris. It was an exciting city.
Is there anything shot by the French?
Secret filming was punishable by death, but some people still tried. This was shot with a camera hidden in a bicycle basket. Obvious German presence. Look at the cinema for German soldiers.
It doesn't really tell you very much.
Sometimes they managed to film acts of resistance.
Taken silent with a small cine camera, these pictures, after being smuggled into this country, have been enlarged to standard size. For obvious reasons, pictures are rare. Therefore, this scene is of particular interest. It shows the havoc caused at Grenoble when the German artillery park was blown up by French patriots.
So they did fight then?
Certainly. By 1943, the French resistance had 40,000 members. They took tremendous risks, and not just to themselves. If caught, all men in the resistors' family were liable to the death penalty, all women to forced labor.
Resist. This is the cry in all our hearts. Join together with family, with friends, strengthen and comfort those who doubt and those who think it hopeless. We have only one ambition, one passion, to accomplish the rebirth of a France that is pure and free.
30,000 French civilians were shot during the occupation, whilst countless others lived in constant fear of the Gestapo, the German secret police. By 1943, it was clear that Pétain had not saved France from the Germans. The Vichy regime had been created to salvage French honor, but by passing laws against the Jews, by hunting down members of the resistance, by sending thousands to Germany as slave laborers, honor was often sacrificed.
Was there resistance elsewhere?
Select another country.
All right.
Denmark. Almost total opposition and non-collaboration. It's been said that everyone, from the king to the fisher boy, tried to obstruct German rule. They even smuggled all but a few hundred of Denmark's Jewish population over to unoccupied Sweden. Yugoslavia had the largest underground army. Known as partisans, they were organized into a national army of liberation and led by a communist, Marshal Tito. At times, the partisans controlled vast areas of Yugoslavia and engaged the German army in full-scale battles. Belgium, 1942. 12,000 people engaged in producing secret newspapers that kept people informed on what was really going on. The Greek resistance derailed 117 trains, destroyed 200 locomotives and 1,500 wagons. The Ukraine.
They're not resisting.
No. At first, the Ukrainians welcomed the Germans.
Nowhere have I seen the slightest sign of hatred. We are greeted by smiling faces. Women come out from their villages onto the very battlefield, bringing wooden platters of bread, butter and eggs, and refuse to let you move on before you've eaten.
Why did they help them?
They'd always hated being ruled by the Russians.
Would Hitler treat them any better?
Not at all. Hitler divided human beings into different racial groups. The peoples of Western Europe and Scandinavia he considered to be racially similar to the Germans. But the Slavs of Eastern Europe and Russia he labeled as Untermensch, an inferior race. His plans included the destruction of nations like Russia and Poland to create a living space for the Germans.
But what was to happen to the people?
Beyond their use to the Germans, their fate was of no interest.
I woke up one morning and heard thousands of dogs howling in the distance. I called my orderly and said, Sandor, what is all that howling and moaning? Not far from here, he said, there is a huge mass of Russian prisoners. They're moaning because they are starving. I went to have a look, and there they were, tens of thousands of them behind wire. Their faces were dried up, and their eyes were sunk deep into their sockets. Hundreds were dying every day, and those with any strength left dumped them in a vast pit.
The treatment of civilians was no better. Local leaders were hunted down and killed. Even those who tried to collaborate could be tortured or shot. Everything had to be restructured to suit German demands.
The Slavs are to work for us. Insofar as we don't need them, they may die. Education is dangerous. Breeding should be discouraged. As for food, they won't get more than is absolutely necessary. We are the masters. We come first.
By the end of 1941, 500,000 Soviet citizens had been killed. Millions more were rounded up and taken to Germany as slave labor.
Slave labor?
It was all part of the new order, inferior races working for the master race. People were taken from all over occupied Europe. All worked long hours in bad conditions. But even here, it was those from Eastern Europe and Russia who were the worst treated.
The Russians must have resisted.
They joined the partisans in their thousands.
What we have to do is to teach people in the shortest possible time the main methods of combat. Shooting, throwing grenades, street fighting, digging trenches. We must sign up young people. They can carry shells, water, act as messengers and so on. And we have to see that no one is just an onlooker. The enemy is at the gates. It is a question of life and death.
As ever, reprisals for partisan activity were severe.
It just doesn't seem to stop.
Violence, atrocity, reprisal. Nowhere in occupied Europe escaped. The Netherlands, May 1942. 480 officials held hostage and many shot in retaliation for breaches of public order.
Poland.
100 resistors killed for the death of every German. In Palmieri, a village near Warsaw, several thousand were killed for a single attack. Czechoslovakia. In Lidice, the entire population was killed to revenge for the assassination of SS General Heydrich. Lidice was then burnt to the ground.
It just goes on and on. What's this?
Those who were killed because they didn't fit into Hitler's new order.
The figures can't be right.
They're only estimates. No one can be sure how many people were killed. Some say the number of Jews who died could be as high as 8 to 10 million.
But why?
Hitler did not invent the hatred of the Jews, anti-Semitism. The Jewish people had been persecuted for hundreds of years. They were regarded as Christ killers, an enemy and a threat. Hitler built on this existing hatred and blamed the Jews for all of Germany's ills. A stream of propaganda attacked and misrepresented them and their religion.
Was there ever a crime without a Jew involved in it? They are like maggots. Open any rotting sore, you will find them, dazzled by the sudden light.
People couldn't have believed this. It's rubbish.
People did believe it, and there was more to come. In 1935, Hitler announced a series of anti-Jewish laws aimed at making their lives impossible. It became a crime simply to be Jewish or to mix with them.
Why didn't they try and get out?
Many did, but Germany was their home, and few could foresee the terrible extremes to which the Nazis would go. In 1938, on Kristallnacht, thousands of Jewish shops were smashed and looted. 36 Jews were killed and 20,000 arrested. But there were only 500,000 Jews in Germany. As Hitler's armies pushed eastwards into Poland and Russia, millions of Jews came under Nazi rule. After years of vicious racist propaganda, German soldiers treated the Jews like vermin. They filmed and photographed violent acts to send home as evidence of how well they were doing in the war against the Jews.
I have no words to describe the Nazi terror and brutality of that day. They were shooting and burning. There was hell all around us. The horrible things that happened exceeded all imagination. People were shot in the houses, in the streets, in the market square. There were dead Jews all over town.
For those who survived the first roundups, the Nazis created ghettos in large cities to contain them.
Jews living outside are required to move into the Jewish area by October the 31st, 1940. They may take with them only traveling kit and bed linen. The Jewish Council of Elders will soon receive information regarding the permanent segregation of the area.
The worst ghetto was in Warsaw, where 500,000 Jews were walled into a small area of the city and kept in severely overcrowded conditions on starvation rations.
A Jew does not dare make a sound of protest. There have been cases when courageous Jews were shot in full view of their entire family, and the murderers were not held responsible.
Specially formed groups of German soldiers were given the job of exterminating whole communities. Many people risked their lives by keeping a written record of what they saw, so that the crimes would not be forgotten.
August the 2nd, Monday. Shooting of big batches has started once again. Today about 4,000 people were driven up, shot by 80 executioners, all drunk. This time terrible tortures before shooting. Many of the wounded writhed about in agony. Nobody finished them off.
Why didn't they do something?
In April 1943, the Warsaw Ghetto did rise. It was the first mass revolt against the Germans in occupied Europe.
The Germans went from house to house and burnt the buildings and blew them up. And the fire, the heat, penetrated the bunkers that were under the ground and poisoned everything. Ruined the water, ruined the food. People were living in a true hell. A true hell. They fling themselves out of the burning window, shouting insults at Germany and the Führer. The number of Jews whose extermination has been certified in the course of the action is 56,065. The Jewish area of Warsaw no longer exists.
So they failed?
Yes, but badly armed civilians had held out for 27 days against the might of the German army. The survivors were rounded up and sent to the concentration camps. By the end of January 1942, German leaders made a decision to use all the resources of modern technology to bring about the total destruction of all the Jewish people in Europe. This was to be their final solution. Officials, lists, timetables, trains, everything was highly organized. The few who survived bear witness to the fate of millions.
We were packed like sardines. It was bad. But we still hoped that we will be able to work. We knew we were going to Auschwitz, but we hoped that we'll be able to work there, that my parents will live. My mother forgot her belt from her dress, and my father I remember he paid a fortune for a belt from another lady that had 2 belts so that she would look pretty. I brushed my hair so that I'll look pretty. We knew that young people have a better chance, but we still hoped that my parents will live.
Waiting in the east were the death camps. Auschwitz was one of 5 special camps designed like factories for the efficient extermination of human beings. On arrival, a selection was carried out.
We were separated from elderly people. My parents were on the right, my husband and my 2 brothers and myself, we were on the left with young people. Young women that had children in their arms were also put together with the old people. Some of the prisoners tried to pull a child away from a mother, thus saving the life of the mother. Some of the mothers wouldn't let the children go. The children were thrown into a lorry. There was a big lorry. Never put in the lorry, always thrown into the lorry. And, well, that was the end. That was the last time I've seen my mother and father.
For those not selected because they were too old or too young, sick or infirm, death came quickly. They were told to undress, then packed into the shower room. When the door was closed, a tin of poison gas was emptied into the chamber. Death was painful and took anything up to 20 minutes. When it was all over, other inmates had to go in and remove the bodies.
For this, I need another voice, other words. The bodies were entwined, yellow. There were prisoners armed with pliers who searched the corpses' mouths and extracted the gold teeth. We were to throw the bodies into a mass grave. I had become one of the Totenjuden, death Jews.
For the able-bodied, there was forced labor and a life expectancy of 3 months if they were lucky.
Hunger and starvation rations, sadism, medical neglect, disease, beatings, hangings, freezing, shootings. Epidemics of spotted fever and typhus were permitted to run rampant. Life in this camp meant nothing. Why didn't we kill ourselves? Why? It remains a mystery. What can't be denied is the fact that each of us possesses an exceptionally strong will to live. We're thankful just to survive today. We no longer think about tomorrow.
As defeat for the Germans became more likely, they began to try and destroy all evidence of what had gone on in the camps. But when Allied troops liberated them in 1945, the extent of the atrocities was only too clear. And for those who'd survived, the job of ensuring the world would remember began.